this community, we have a lot of sub-communities. One of them is a so-called developer circle. And the developer circle is organized by so-called captains, which are members who take care of it. And I'm the captain of the developers circle sub-community. And I'd be really excited to see you one day in Berlin as well. And for today's topic, we have a really exciting panel discussion planned tonight. The topic is learning to code in 2021. It's going to be really interesting. We're going to jump through a few topics. As you all know, through COVID, everyone has switched to remote learning, which has been a very exciting but also very difficult phase, especially for those in the teaching business, but also for those who are teaching coding themselves or as a hobby. It's super exciting to see how the landscape has shifted and what we can do. The second part will be, we'll look at alternatives to coding. For example, there's a new trend in no-code tools, which could be an alternative and also something interesting for those who are learning coding and who want to get into it. And also see what are the best ways for self-coding. And without much further ado, I'd like to jump right into the exciting speakers we have tonight. The first one's Andrej Kovac, who is a science communicator and a very enthusiastic and skilled developer who I met in Factory. And I'd love to have you and give us a short 3-minute introduction about yourself and what you're doing. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Lars, also for the nice intro. And really happy to be here. And yeah, share actually my biggest passion, which is education, and which I'm doing now for many, many years. And I'm now a software engineer, a freelance software engineer, helping different clients. But next to that, I'm a software trainer, and I'm teaching development teams to level up and to learn new frameworks. And next to that, I also do own projects, but also client work. And in the past have taught in a lot of different domains, basically any ages you can imagine, and people coming from any background. So from small kids, and also teaching kids at science festivals, where I used interactive things like Scratch programming language or Lego Mindstorm robots, small adventures where they could build Indiana Jones robot, and in that part also learn programming. I also prepared a small slide there for you, just to show you a few of the pictures. And next to that, I've also always been part of a lot of hackathons, which I think is a very nice way to learn programming. Perhaps we'll have the chance to talk more about that. So basically in 24 hours, you create a team and try to program something from scratch. And it doesn't matter if you haven't learned anything about it yet. You support each other and build a real project. And I also, if there's not just a global pandemic around, I also perform at science slams. And there I also try to give people, from a general audience, a sense of what some of technological terms mean, like artificial intelligence or even other programming topics, and try to deliver that in an entertaining and fun way. Yeah, I think that's kind of to me, and I'm really excited here to talk also then about the other experiences of the people in education.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. That sounds really exciting. Our next speaker is a professor of software engineering at Code University in Berlin, a super interesting new private university who's focusing on project-based learning. Adam, welcome to our panel discussion.
Hi, everyone.
Could you give us a short introduction of yourself and say what you're doing at Code and what Code is doing differently than other universities?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction, Captain Lars. So like Andrej, I consider myself an educator, a passionate teacher. I was a physicist by education, actually, and while I was learning physics and climbing around on particle accelerators at CERN and other places, I, at some point, picked up this skill of software engineering and coding in general. And turns out that's a pretty valuable skill to have these days. So I've been at Code University of Applied Sciences now for about 2.5 years. The whole institution is only a little bit older than that. So it's been a very exciting thing to grow with and watch and learn. So what are we doing? We are basically focusing on digital education, but not in the sense of remote learning, right? We're focusing on the skills of software engineering, interaction design, and product management as it's needed for the modern tech world. But that sounds very, very skill oriented. It is, but we also have a strong liberal arts background at our university, and we expect all of our students to come through and think about what they're doing. And we have great books courses and things like that as well. So it's not a coding bootcamp. It is you get a bachelor's degree, but we think that it's something different than a degree in computer science, and also something different than what a bootcamp offers, but a really hands-on practical bachelor's degree that prepares you, especially for the world of technology.
Super cool and super interesting. Really looking forward to hearing more about that later. Our next speaker is a co-founder. He's the co-founder of Strive School, which is an online school for learning coding, which is completely free as far as I've understood, until you actually get a job in that domain. Welcome, Tobias. It's amazing to have you here on board, and I'd love to hear more about Strive School. Do you want to give us a short introduction?
Yeah, hi everyone, and hi Andre and Adam. My name is Toby, and I'm a co-founder of Strive School. We are an online program, so we are a fully remote school. We started a few months before this whole madness started, which caught us on one end unprepared. But our idea is simply combining a really good online remote experience when it comes to learning to code, and combining that with a business model that makes it inclusive for people to be able and pursue a career. Unlike Adam and unlike code, which I respect and love, we do not pursue the idea of replicating or kind of like becoming an accredited university or accredited institution or anything. We just think of ourselves as a cool program, which is creating a new version of bootcamps. Like bootcamps are famous to be like a couple months long, and they really put you on a treadmill. We kind of put people on a treadmill as well, but we do it for 6 to 8 months, and we use a concept called mastery-based learning, which means that at the end of every unit, people, if they don't pass a formal test, we basically have them kind of retake the unit again. So we are basically trying to build the new point of optimum between what is a normal bootcamp and a university, which for some people may be just kind of too much of a commitment, while we do not think that current bootcamps offer the quality of the education that we can offer in 6 to 8 months. So yeah, and thanks a lot for having me here.
Wow, amazing, really cool. Thanks for being here. Coming to our last speaker, he's a technical architect at Salesforce, Florian Pinte-Landgraf. And some of you may ask, what is Salesforce doing here? Well, it's super exciting. They have amazing tools for no code, and are also in the teaching business, of course, because you have to learn how those tools run. Welcome, Florian. Amazing to have you here. Do you want to give us a short introduction about Salesforce and what role coding and especially no code plays, and learning about no code plays at Salesforce?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. So as some of you might know, Salesforce is the leading provider of CRM systems. So the systems around marketing, sales, servicing customers, but also something like e-commerce and something like that. And we started Salesforce 20 years ago, completely out of the cloud. And my role as a technical architect basically is to explain to our customers what the technical foundation of Salesforce is, how the cloud is built up, how they can use the cloud to make the software their own, to adapt it to their needs, but also how to create a completely new application on this cloud platform. And for this, we have a lot of no coding tools, we have low coding tools, and we have also a learning platform. And I'm very happy to talk to you about that later on.
Super, thanks so much. Yeah, and with that, let's jump right into the topic. So our first topic is COVID and remote learning, which is very fitting. As you all know, we're in an online event. We'd love to do this in person, but everyone's at home. Everybody has to stream from home. And also the whole teaching industry, as you know, has shifted to home. Schools are closed. And it must be a huge impact, especially for institutions like Code University, who did a lot of project-based learning, teams working together on site. How did that go? To Adam, like how did Code University shift from an on-site institution to a completely digital remote learning university?
Yeah, thanks, Lars. So, of course, I mean, this last year has been a bit of a surprise for everyone. And I'll try to walk you through a little bit what we experienced and what I experienced as a professor there. So for me, I want to also start by saying I've been working remotely in one way or another for about 15 years, and I love remote work. And I worked sometimes at the factory Berlin in Treptow, and sometimes from my office in Wedding, because that 1 hour was way too far for me to travel sometimes. But this is different. This is not remote the way we wanted it to be, right? This is forced. This is a pandemic. And I think it's always important to remember that even after a year, this isn't normal. And the reason I say that is because working as an educator, you see also the psychological stress and a lot of the things that students go through. And so what that means is that my job is totally different than it was a year ago, not just because we're working remotely. Now, what could we do? I think at a traditional university, you could have switched to being remote pretty quickly and easily. There are a lot of traditional universities where a professor stands in a lecture hall and talks for hours and hours. And honestly, the stuff on Coursera and edX is better most of the time anyway. Code is a new type of university. So we use those courses. We use CS50 and we use Andrew Ng's courses as additional learning material for our students. And so on some level, our entire model was built around the idea that someone else is doing the lecturing and there are other books written. And what we provide is a community, an extraordinary space in the Factory Berlin. We provide experts. We provide a high energy atmosphere with people doing startups and hackathons and a kitchen where everyone meets. And it's a really high energy, exciting place. It is so hard to walk out of our campus. And so on that level, it was really hard to make the switch, right? Because to some extent, the added value of us as an institution, well, it got diminished. Let's put it like that. So what could we do? Well, project-based learning is about a lot of things. It's about teamwork. It's about collaboration. Some of our students, some of our faculty, we could pretty easily make that switch in the middle of our semester. We had teams who formed in person in January and February, and then had to switch to work remotely in March or April. And some of our students, of course, needed a bit of time to reorient their lives. But for a lot of people, they managed to finish the semester in a relatively normal way. For me, the really big challenge, though, wasn't then. For me, the challenge came in the autumn, which was when we brought on our new students, because there we were not faced with the question, how do we shift something from offline to online like we all did in March? But there we were faced with the question, how do we bring in another class of students, which is only our 4th class ever, adding a lot, 150 or 170 members to our community and create this energy, create this community spirit. That was the hard part. And I have to say, it's different. And we've learned a lot, and thankfully we had that experience in the spring. We can do our mixers and we can do our streaming events, and we can see each other on Zoom however many hours we want. Some things work really well for some people because they've managed to really connect with fellow students and faculty in this environment. And for some students, of course, it's quite tricky. So what I would say, the big picture is that you can shift a lecture to be online, and if you're coding or doing anything else, a lot of your time is behind a computer anyway. But the hard part, and I think we've learned that not just in a university, but I think we see that in everything, the hard part is community and the human connection. And that is tricky. And I think that's tricky for all of us, no matter what fields we're in right now.
Absolutely, I completely agree. As a remote school, I think Tobia also has a lot of experience probably with community building, maybe in the remote context. I guess for you also the shift from COVID or the impact actually might have been positive as you're offering a completely remote opportunity from the start. How did that transition go, and how do you how would you compare to the community-based and project-based approach of Code University?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. I actually completely second what Adam is saying. We started a few months before the pandemic, just with the idea, the MVP, and so it struck us. I do not believe that we were so as a human being, of course, not happy at all of what happened. And I'm first a human being and then an entrepreneur, so I really, frankly, would have really avoided all of this. Then the second thing is that from a actually counterintuitive point of view, no, it didn't help us out so much as people can think, because everyone has gone online. Well, first, we were kind of like uniquely positioned to go online. So frankly, it has brought kind of like the market has become more kind of bigger for sure, but also like everyone is a competitor now. And I think long term, we differentiate ourselves because we are a remote company running a remote school. And it is fundamentally just like different the way we work, different in the culture, different the way we think. We're, we're not trying, um, we're not trying to uniquely only replicate mechanics of physical proximity learning online. We're trying to like invent kind of like new ways to do it. What does that mean in practice is that we're kind of like building up a kind of a coherent stack when it comes to the user experience and making it an online native experience. And this was kind of what we were focused on since the beginning. And I also agree with Adam on the second point. This is not remote. This is not remote life. Remote life is actually awesome. Remote life means that I can go visit my mom and dad in Italy, and I love them. I really love them, so I want to go and visit them every couple of weeks, and I want to have lunch with my family. I want to meet my friends. I like to travel. I like to like visit friends and people that I love. And I like to go out, explore cities. So I cannot do it. So frankly, I just can't wait the world to get back to normal. And even if we lose, few leads or the leads, maybe people will be less interested in only online programs like ours. I'm actually going to be very happy to go back to normal life. So when it comes to differences with code, I do not know code well enough to be able to like kind of like speak in profundity. But I think they're doing really good job at putting. I think if you look at the old ways were like either university, old school university, or kind of a boot camp, of which kind of the first wave of boot camps was kind of very limited in capacity. Like, frankly, it's unthinkable that in 2 months or 8 weeks or 9 weeks, you can become a software engineer. I'm specialized in Bitcoin programming, and it took me 6 months just to figure out the very basics, just because it's kind of a very complex topic and it takes years to like be comfortable. So I do not believe that we can think when it comes to education, we cannot think in weeks. Probably Adam thinks we should think in years. I still think that we can think in kind of like next, like I think like 6, 8, 10 months, which is the program. It's kind of a decent compromise between kind of like 2 years and 2 months, I would say. And this is really like what we think. Like I think it's very cool that there are a bunch of companies, startups, and education companies in general that are experimenting with how to make learning more efficient, more engaging. And offering different mix. Someone's going to be like more brought to us for the style of program and what we do, and others that have time may go to Adam. If I was 18, I would probably go to Adam and Code University. For someone that maybe already has a degree, maybe like in that case, an option like ours could be more efficient to some extent. So frankly, I'm just really like super happy to see that there is private education on the rise, and there are that we are inventing new ways of doing this. It's either one-to-one training, it's kind of like a university, a new model of university, or new model of boot camps. We do not consider ourselves a boot camp. We call ourselves a master camp, which we're just trying to like steer away from that idea as much as we can. But I'm just very excited, and of course, I think the one positive thing of the pandemic, if there is any, is that it has brought the idea that we need better, more market-oriented education. And I think it's very important that this conversation happens in Europe at scale, because we spend tons of money on education, and we do not do most of the time a good service to tons of people by providing them not great options. So very excited about the next few years, but again, can't wait to go back and physically visit code. Maybe that's gonna be my first thing.
Absolutely, I think you speak for all of us there. That we hope this whole pandemic is over as soon as possible, but we have to see the silver lining, and I think there's a few things. that have actually improved and hopefully will be sustainable for the future.
And can I jump in there also on something that Toby said? I think so. I do think in years, at least for many people, and I think it's. I want to explain why. So for one, I fully agree with you. The most important thing in a field like this is innovation, right? And I should also say, like, I've never taken a course in computer science or software engineering in my life, but I'm a professor of it, and that tells me that there's something wrong to some extent, right? Or something right, maybe. But I fully agree, and I love that we all have our own approaches, and I think it's great that there's a lot of room for it. So at the same time, on some level, I think you're right that you can do this in months, but I think you can do it in months because the job market is very lopsided right now. You can go to a boot camp, not learn a whole lot, and get a junior developer job at especially a bigger organization. But the reason isn't because you have the skills that people are looking for. The reason is because there is such a dearth of developers out there that companies are in a position that they'll hire you for a relatively low salary and invest in you for 3 years before any hope that you can help them. And I do think that exists. And I know that's not what you're doing, Toby, but I think that's still because of the lopsidedness of the market right now. Boot camps, even traditional boot camps, are still quite attractive. One of the things that we're trying to do at Code is, in a sense, skip that phase. So maybe I can put it like this: I expect a lot of our students to be able to be a technical co-founder or to be the second hire at a small company right out of university, and not take a junior position at a large company. Some of them want to, for sure. And some of them will be able to, absolutely. But I think a lot of them can also be the second or third or even first developer on a team straight out of university. And if I think about that, it's actually kind of the same thing. You need a few years, I think. But in one case, you might be within an organization already that's hiring you. In another case, you maybe have different goals. But the reality is, I do think you need years because coding is something you can learn in half a year or a year. Not learn, master. I know everything, but I don't know everything. But you can build an app in a couple of months, and maybe you can build 3 apps in a couple of months. But when I talk about software engineering, I mean also the long-term process. And there, I'm talking about could you have jumped on the team? Or what would it have taken to jump on the team that just put something on Mars that landed itself? Not 3 months, maybe not 3 years, but maybe after 3 years with us, you could have joined JPL. Maybe. And I think there is a difference there. And I think we often forget the difference between working in the finance sector or getting something onto Mars from trying to build a web app and get some funding from someone. There's a big gap there, I think, also. But I agree with you. It totally depends on where you are in life, your goals. There's a lot of value in all of these initiatives.
I mean, I 100% second that. I just want you to consider this. We even get people with computer science degrees applying to us. We get people with PhD in chemistry. We get people with like mechanical engineering degrees. So I think it's really like, and then of course we also get career changes, more traditional career changes. We call this kind of cluster of people degree changers because it's really not career changer if you're like 23 and then mechanical engineer. So I think like there is a question of we probably feel that we sit, or kind of like our role is more of a complementary to the current system where we build on top to some extent, while I feel that if you guys execute really well as you're doing at scale, you can literally become a substitute to one of those kind of like more traditional base layer providers. And I feel in both cases there is value provided because the people that we serve are different. Again, if I was 18, I would probably apply to Code, not to Stripe School. And that's just because if I'm a mechanical engineer, I maybe go for another option, right? So I just think like I had a discussion yesterday with a friend who's a full professor of computer science at Politecnico di Milano, which is one of the top universities, I think the top technical university in Italy, one of the top in Europe. And we had discussions on fundamentals and basics. And I think it's very important that if you are going full stack in the education, kind of like to some extent, where like you give them foundational training, which is not training, which is really like culture. It's kind of culture, an engineering culture, and then you also on top of that deliver project based and everything else. But it's almost like I almost think there are two different things, right? When I talk to a mechanical engineer and I have to help them, kind of like become proficient in coding, there's a different challenge than a different, than your persona. So I think that's really where I draw the line. But I totally agree with you that it can take. We pride ourselves that our program is 1,000 hours. It gets you to 1,000 hours of training, and 1,000 hours is a sensible milestone in terms of like being able to maybe not run but being able to walk, right? And then I think the next milestone is 10,000 hours, right? So we can't possibly get people there. It's just like it would be inefficient. And that's really like, I think that's really the difference in the philosophy. But I agree with you that to do things well, it takes years, and you need to have strong foundations. And this is also what we look for when we talk to people. We do an exception when it comes to people with apparently not strong foundation, but where we see a signal of either extreme talent or extreme how do you say, commitment, where we see that for example, we have a partnership with one of the largest apps to learn to code in the world, which is basically sending us the best people that they teach. There are folks that are learning for 90 days straight for over 30 minutes an hour on an app how to learn to code, right? I think if you do that, even if you don't have a specific background, it just signals that you have a bit of a willingness to to do the extra mile. And I think that's also something super, super important. So that's really like where we stand from a philosophical point of view.
Absolutely, super interesting. And I also feel there's a lot of the question probably also comes down to, do you want to get into a job as quickly as possible, or are you more interested in the computer science aspect of things if you decide to take a school or university in this case? At least that's my interpretation. We can touch that in a second. I'd like to jump on what you just said. You said there's amazing, like, people are learning on apps for hours at an end and learning to code through apps. And for me, it would be super interesting. Maybe we can get Andre to share his experiences. I think he's been a science communicator and coding teacher. Do you also have experience with tools for remote learning? Have you used apps before with your students, or to learn yourself even?
Yeah, also thanks, like really cool discussion already. And I myself, actually, became a web developer with a Udemy course. So I didn't study computer science. I did like computer science stuff at uni, but like, I did this Udemy course, then some coincidences happened, and then some people gave me a task for like, build this web shop, and we give you 3 weeks. And then I spent like sleepless nights trying to hack something together. And then I did a lot of learning on the job, like similar as Adam also said, like the learning happens here or there. Like I had computer science fundamentals before, but yes, and that's like a nice environment we are in, where you can then go and also with a background which is not like the classical one, go and get a career in this field. But learning tools. So there I also, like when I was still not remotely, I also used things like Khan Academy inside my classes, which was really nice, like to get people up to skills with statistics. I use Khan Academy, for example, for distribution learning. They've got like apples and oranges. You can move around and then learn the distributions. And I could exactly see who of the students was still like struggling with a certain skill, and then like give them some extra exercises in that domain. So that would be also for me interesting, maybe then later to hear from Adam and Tobia, and like how you guys use tools in your programs and which ones. But now then, I'm now teaching since a year. I'm teaching professional developers and also beginners like coding in online workshops. And there, of course, it's very different than an on-site workshop as well. But I found the things not to be only negative. So that I would also like to know from the others, maybe more specifically. Yeah. Also, but for me, for example, group work, I found to be actually easier online. Why? So when I get all my people into breakout rooms, first of all, I can randomize the breakout rooms easily. And people who might not talk to each other will be forced to be in the same room. And you don't have this difficulty of having to, like when you're sitting in a classroom or so, you have to turn around or move over somewhere and then like, oh, I first want to finish this before I get into the real group chat. No, with the screen, you're like face on and you have a group discussion and group work going on and can share your screen directly, collaborate on it, like with VS Code collaboration feature, you can both write your code, all of you can write simultaneously on one file. Maybe the others can also share whether you have experience with that in class. That I found really positive. Difficult thing, which was also already mentioned by Adam and Tobia, was for me also like this human connection aspect. So of course, when I give a training, yeah, it's also super important, I know, to have a connection with the students and to just be present, yeah, show presence as a presenter, yeah, or as the lecturer here. And for this, in on-site workshops, I like to do a lot of energizers because I have a background. I played improvisational theater before, and I also introduced that in all my workplaces. The stand-ups in my companies were always fun. We played some games and stuff, and I experimented with that a little bit online. So a few things worked. So we would then all stand up, ask if you stand up, and then shake like your arms and bodies, or we would do a small game where we would I would try to punch somewhere in the screen, left, right, up and down. We would have to hide, and so on. Just, I don't know, get a bit of sense of I don't know, fun and team building things online. So this is like my experience. I always got a very good feedback for that. And although people first were very like, should we really do that? Especially when I teach adults, they're like, man, should we now get up or so? I think there the barrier is also a bit higher online, I found, than in person. In person, like also I, as the teacher, kind of, it's easier for me to kind of say, hey, come on, everyone stand up. But it works somehow. It's also a thing for me as a teacher to have to build up the courage to ask the people, please put on your camera, stand up. And and this would be interesting to know if the others also, how your experience are, or like maybe also interesting for me to share explicitly what kind of things you do to kind of engage the people and create this sense of community remotely. Yeah.
So I've also
Adam,
learned that during this year, with the pandemic, things had to speed up. So all these video conferencing tools, they developed also very fast during these times, like being able now to do a breakout room and something like that works well. What did not work well 1 year ago, and now that's of course good. But on the other side, of course, it's difficult when people don't turn their camera on and so on. Then you don't have the feedback and so on. So it kind of makes it hard to really get a feeling of what you're saying is relevant to the people. So it has its ups and downs, I guess, but you can do a lot nowadays. That's a great part.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment, Florian, especially as a teacher, the ability to read the room, as we call it, is just totally missing, right? No matter how much you ask, do you need coffee? Are you doing well? You just have no idea, right? What I think, Andre, for me...
Sorry, what's the percentage, just rough, of students who keep their screen on all the time?
Oh,
in your
so
classes,
we make it, so we make it a pretty strict rule to keep your camera on unless you have a good reason not to. So I would say if you remind students in the beginning, 90+%, and if you don't remind them, 30% maybe. So, in terms of things that work and things that don't work, I wanna distinguish two words the way that I use them between group work, as you mentioned, Andre, and teamwork. For group work, if we talk about a workshop environment, I fully agree with you. Breakout rooms are wonderful. That's why we went for Zoom as opposed to anything else at our university, because of that feature. Also, things like digital whiteboards. We've been using Miro quite heavily, where you can. So I've in classes this week had people do collaborative mind maps on Miro, where previously what I would do is you would write it out on cards and then walk around a room. And that works with 6 people, but not with 40. And now, I mean, it doesn't really work with 40 either, but a little bit better. So I do think that there are some tools that are great. I'm also really interested in, Toby, your point. Toby, you mentioned you're not just trying to create a simulacrum of what we do in person. And I feel like actually most of our tools right now are doing that. So if I think about Miro as a digital whiteboard tool, on some level, it's great because I can use the same methods I've always used. And on some other level, I feel a little bit like it's a digital camera that still sounds like there's a shutter there. Because I'm like, what's the word in design? Skeuomorphism, right? It's an old design pattern that we've just taken over into digitization. And some things work great. Some things are you're just running up a hill,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. This is a great discussion. So I would love to have my co-founder here because I'm unfortunately I'm the CEO and it means that I have most of the worry and least of the fun. And I don't participate so much in the classes. It's actually a terrible role. I don't know why I wanted to do it. I think I should have gone for the other role. It was such a stupid idea. So if anyone is listening and you think it's for the company, do not become the CEO. Become the other person. Like become the co-founder that has the fun. But so what my team tells me, and what I also see from the interactions, the hardest thing it is imagining what we can't imagine because unfortunately, like we have this inherited mental models on the world and everything, which then we try to replicate onto new things, right? If you think about even the internet, when the internet started, which actually started with an educational need, but let's say kind of like the commercial internet they started with Mark Cuban. He created the radio on the internet, which was at that time one of the stupidest idea ever, right? But he was just literally trying to like do one-to-one. We know the radio, then we know internet, and then we put the radio on the internet. Turns out a few years later, today we have Clubhouse, right? Which is not the radio, but it's maybe like, it's really not so different and it kind of like it's completely different. So we are very much in education, I think, very much at the kind of 1.0 phase where most things are just like replicants of old mental models just translated into like digital tools, the whiteboard digital tools. There is also this new wave of digital offices that literally replicate the entire digital office, and you have to move around with your little kind of like icon in the office, which I think I don't know if that's going to work. I'm not a big fan of the idea, but if you think about it, it's literally trying to put the normal office with walls and desks and everything into the digital. Like, I don't know how much sense does it make, but I think that's the point, right? What we see is the hardest part is engagement. And what we try to do is instead of having like, what we try to do two things. We try to keep things relevant. I think this is like something that is, how do you say it? This is like maybe an underused tools. Like rather than trying to make fun something that is not relevant, we just cut it out, or we just give it to you as an extra material after, or like, as a pre-material, right? So if we know that something doesn't fly in a specific format, rather than try to make it fly by adding, kind of like some entertainment, we try to just like, we just to cut it out. And the other thing we do very frequent check-ins without trying to disrupt, the class, but kind of frequent check-ins. And the other thing is, there is this person which is called Rory Sutherland, which I have become a big fan of. And Rory is not a computer scientist. Rory is one of the greatest advertisers in the world. And advertisers have an incredible kind of like attention to human attention, right? Because that's what they have to catch fundamentally. So they're really good at that. And I think he has this idea that, companies these days, we try all the mechanics possible and incentives, and I pay people if they're watching, or like everyone tries to have like this monetary incentive, or like kind of like very manipulative things, while what we do is we simply ask. So we introduce this very simple thing where we have the how do you say, the in Italian we would say la faccia di bronzo, which means the bronze face. Just simply go look through the people, and then if you see someone without a webcam, you just say to them, hey, what name, Adam, would be really awesome if you could open up the webcam, because for the other people it is a better experience. And turns out a lot of people understand that. A lot of people know that it's just like, okay, maybe I should open up the camera. So there is not rocket science yet, but I would say that we're using, we're just trying to build a culture ultimately of people that understand the importance of it. And the second thing that we do is we're using tools which embed feedback ideas. For example, we're using a tool that I recommend. It's called EduFlow, which is also a YC company. They embed. David is a PhD at the University of Copenhagen in computer science, and he's an educator. So he comes from that background, and he really built EduFlow as a way to foster peer learning. Now, we do not believe 100% peer learning is the right thing for us when it comes to like something like what we do. I think it's too fast paced, and people are too like kind of like the level needs to be. I think peer learning is something that can happen once you have the basics, and it can be like challenging when it's literally like too early in your learning journey to give meaningful feedback to someone. So it can actually be like you may be not ready for that. But we are still very big fan of some of the ideas that they embedded. And we're also starting to build our own kind of like our own lattice work to put all of these ideas together and integrate the learning management system, the Zoom, and a chat, and a bunch of other things, which ultimately will lead to like a more coherent digital experience. There is no silver bullet, so we still have to experiment, but that's what we're heading for.
Yeah, I think that's some really great feedback for a lot of digital educators right there. And speaking of tools and other feedback opportunities, I just wanted to say to the viewers of the event, we have a Slido set up. So if you have a question to any of the speakers after the talk, we'll have some time to talk about it. Feel free to jump in to the Slido and ask any question you want. Vote on them, and the most frequent voted we will ask in person in a few minutes. I'll use this opportunity as well, speaking of tools, to switch to the second topic, which is self-learning, maybe for those who are watching the stream and who are not so interested in joining a full commitment program, but who want to learn themselves, but also alternatives even to the whole coding process. Say you're a CEO of a company and you want to build an app, but you don't have any coding skills. Recently, there's been a huge trend in no-code tools coming up, which has been super interesting to follow. I myself did not try any of them yet, but I've seen some amazing stuff you can do with that. And I'd love to speak with an expert, Florian, about that. What do you think are the possibilities of no code? And do you think no code is actually a serious alternative for, let's say, founders who want to build their product?
Yeah, definitely. I think that so for me, before I joined Salesforce, I was also a software engineer for some years in Munich. And then I came to Salesforce, and I was amazed by how much you can do with low-code tools, right? Because now, when you think about you want to create an application, then you have a lot of stuff you need to take care of. You need to take care of your database. You need to have a business logic where you have your business rules. Then you need to take care of your user interface and so on. And with low-code, a lot of these tasks are taken away from you. So you can think of it like if you create with low code on a Salesforce platform, you basically set up your data model, and out of the box, the user interface is created for you. So you get a UI which is also responsive, so you can put it also in an app, but people can also work in a web browser with this. application, and this they do by low-code tools. And I think that's a great paradigm. Of course, you won't do any kind of application with low-code tools. If I think, for instance, of Netflix, I wouldn't recommend that Netflix builds up their streaming platform with low-code, right? But for a lot of business processes, I think low-code is a great choice to do that.
And how do you go to teach Salesforce developers, saying CEO of no technical background, to learn no code? So do you have like a learning platform, or do you do one-on-one courses?
Yes, so we have a learning platform for that. I'm trying to share my screen. Please give me your feedback if you see my screen. Does that work?
I guess it will work, and the technique will show it later. You can just continue talking, and it will probably appear sometime, I hope.
All right. So of course, when it comes to Salesforce and generally with tools, you need to get up to speed, and to learn it, you need to have a learning platform. And for that, with Salesforce, we also have such a learning platform. It's called Trailhead, which is basically a modular learning system, which also has a gamification aspect. So if you look at Salesforce Trailhead, then you have different kind of modules which show you how to do different stuff, maybe how to build an app or how to do different business processes and so on. And you have this kind of modules that you can carry out, and at the end you get a badge for this module, and also a points, right? And at the end there is this gamification aspect, because by having this learning module, this learning platform with different modules, everyone in the company wants to have the most amount of modules, right? And to be the subject matter expert in some field. And we also noticed this with Salesforce, that if you have something like that, you get kind of an internal competition, and this speeds up people getting up to speed with learning how to code on the platform. And that's a very relevant task, because we learned in order for Salesforce to be successful, the customers need to be successful, right? And customers will be successful if they get a really good platform where they can build up apps very fast, and two, if they really also have a strategy to enable people to work with this platform and to learn how to code on this platform. Because if you don't enable people to use this platform, then the best technology is not worth anything. So I think these are very important topics to keep in mind. Low code is very important, but you also need to have a learning platform which enables people to really get up to speed very fast.
Maybe
awesome. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Please. Yeah, I can jump in on that topic. So I think, Florian, I really like your idea and your approach, and I fully agree with what you said. There's a use for it, right? And I think we might be on the Gartner hype curve, we might be approaching the end. We might be at the plateau of productivity, as it's called, with no code or low code tools. I think about things like Webflow, etc. It's not new, right? I mean, some of the first coding I ever did wasn't Scratch. It wasn't around back then, but it was things like, lab-based stuff in high school, MATLAB, or things like this, low code, no code programming. This is programming, right? And now and then there was WordPress, which is still around, I hear, which really is that. And I think WordPress is an early evolution of what you're talking about, Florian. It's this reality that a lot of websites have the same problem that they're trying to solve. Not Netflix. It's a great example, right? Not Twitter, not Netflix, but I think that we might be approaching a phase where, if I think about the last 10, 15 years, okay, not the last 5, but if I think about maybe 2000 or 2003, I think that's when WordPress came around, until a few years ago, these tools were helpful for one thing, which was setting up a website. It was you could get your calling card up on the web, on the internet. And we're moving a little bit beyond that. We get into business logic. We get some basic Salesforce. We have things like Airtable coming around, or Webflow, where we can get one level beyond that. And I think that the reality is, for a lot of user-facing things, a lot of products, a lot of companies, if I'm running a restaurant, I do not need to innovate in technology. I need to have good food. And for that, I shouldn't have to hire a software development expert, right? Maybe a designer, but not an engineer. They're way too expensive. Otherwise, my restaurant goes broke, right? And when I think about this, that's what I think of. I think that what's the problem you're trying to solve? If I'm not trying to innovate in technology, I shouldn't have to innovate in technology. And I think it's great that we have low code or no code tools for places where it just becomes a tool like any other. Of course, then and this again gets us to that question we discussed a little earlier, who's the target audience, right? I think everyone should know how to use those tools. And I think a lot of people do through the Office suite. I think people underestimate how much coding you use in Excel or even in macros in Word, and that you have to already learn this basic way of thinking. That is coding in a lot of ways, or at least programming. And then the question becomes, does everyone need to understand what a linked list is? Does everyone need to understand how RAM works? Not many people do. Does everyone need to understand how to build a streaming platform like Netflix? Or what are we on here? I've never heard of this thing before. What's this called?
StreamYard.
StreamYard. Yeah, you probably need engineers to build this. And those people probably can't do this in a low code or no code environment. And I'm not sure they ever will. And that's the really interesting thing for me. Where can you find a problem that so many people have to solve that there's just no reason to have to innovate, and there should be an easy way to do it?
A 100%. Can I second on that? I just like, so during Y Combinator, we saw a lot of our batchmates and also new companies that are now in the batch innovating at it's a hot space. So investors are throwing money at it. So if you build a no-code version of, I don't know, whatever, I think there are things that are more interesting, maybe from an intellectual perspective, but also from like an educator perspective. Things like Replit, for example. Replit is kind of like, it's more interesting because, just because, it is about abstracting kind of like a part of the complexity of running things, which actually we think it's important that people learn. So this is also why we do not maybe use it necessarily, because, at the end, but it's still very much an interesting play, and it allows people to build kind of sole applications for yourself or for your family or for your, like, it's just like kind of like helps you build the long tail kind of in a cool way, and in a fast way. I do agree that I also think like these things are mostly prototyping platforms, even if they're perfect, just because it is unsustainable to think that you just build no code. But I think one company that is doing something very interesting in this space is On Deck. On Deck, I am not affiliated in any way. I have a friend who works there, and an investor who works there. But they run this program. This is an online education company. They run this program where people basically go to explore what's next. And they have people from all over the world. They expose you to like amazing investors, people, and potentially co-founders or early employees at your company. So, and they have a kind of like the CTO, Andreas, has a very interesting kind of approach. He was the CTO of Product Hunt, and he's basically blending a bunch of these no-code tools in the stack, but to allow non-coders in the company to build meaningful applications for the company or for a piece of the company, for a piece of the end users, without having it either completely detached from what they do, and without having to put engineering resources. So it's not really about substituting software engineers at all. It is probably just maybe lowering the barrier to entry to building, which I think ultimately is going to lead to have more software engineers. Because Scratch has helped a lot of people get passionate about it. WordPress, how many developers started by doing WordPress stuff? Tons. So, I don't think I think it's something that it's going to open up the space. It has a limited kind of like impact on the real software engineering stuff, which still requires software engineers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and also a great closing remark maybe for the second block of questions, as we've already been doing, having a talk on for a while. For those who are watching online, we do have a poll running on what is the future of programming, where we're asking, is it code or no code? Which would be super interesting to hear your responses. Maybe as a final question to Florian about this, something I'd be interested in is if, do your clients ever run into boundaries of a no-code platform where they say, oh, I really wish I could now enter some real code to get this feature that I want? Is that something that happens? Or is it more like with the offer of Salesforce?
Well, it's like I said, with for instance the Netflix example, right? So not every use case is suited to be created on a low-code platform. So when you have, for instance, some image processing or something like that, which is very resource consuming and something like that, you probably won't do it on the low-code platform. You would do something rather a use case which would be, for instance, people using an Excel file with some visual VBA scripts and some complex logic and so on. This is a use case you might do with a low-code platform very good, like some transactional data processing, right? If you have some very resource consuming things, it probably would not be the best fit for the platform. But I think it is really important to understand that you have these capabilities and you really need to take it use case by use case and look at the use case, how many users will use it, what kind of data is processed there, what are the timing restrictions and so on. And this will help you decide whether you want to build this use case on a low-code platform or you want to give it to developers to build it with Java and so on.
Yeah.
Amazing, really interesting. Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can I add something there? So I get approached by a lot of people, like as a software engineer. Yeah, Andre, I want to build this, and I want to build that. How much does it cost? Yeah, and like, what do I like? How can I build it? And oftentimes I send them to tell them use no-code tools. Yeah, like try, I don't know, all whatever's out there, Webflow, Wix, WordPress, or the like. But then there's also the other topic which we kind of scratched is, I think Adam kind of mentioned a little bit, is whether you really need to be a full programmer to program the next Netflix, or have this basic understanding of what algorithms are and about technology, which you can also get via Excel or the like. And there, I just want to share from my experience. I was CTO of a startup before. And as a programmer who is really, you want to do programming work, you want to build on algorithms, that's the fun part. But oftentimes you also have to do other things which are more kind of, go in the direction of no code, low code, of adding things to a JSON file, or I don't know, doing some, preparing some things which can then be put into code. But you need an understanding for the whole process and so on. And I think for that, it's important for people also to kind of understand the basics, to then also be a valuable part in a team, in an organization, which will produce a technical solution. Or maybe there's a Tobia question. I heard from other people who ran through a boot camp, who then later went into management positions, and not directly coding positions, but they said it was tremendously helpful for them to learn, get an understanding for computer science and for this program. And is that also I don't know about your alumni? Is there also, what's something like that happening?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I would say we're too young to know. We started basically last year, so we don't have anyone yet in the management positions. I think for the type of, I would say that for the type of business model that we have, positioning, length of the program, I think if you're in management position and you want to learn the basics, there may be more efficient ways to do it. You probably can get the company to pay you for a few hours of training. I don't think, frankly, I think I would say something, maybe Adam is going to kill me for this, but I think if you take, if you're decently smart and I think if you work already in tech, and you take just an hour a day to read a bunch of stuff, maybe a few weekends, and maybe just few tens of hours, you can, as a manager, you can already get so much done. Yeah, exactly. Adam is killing me. But no, in some senses, I think like our course is a bit too much for people that are, they just want to be able to talk to engineers. One thing that we have done as an experiment, just maybe like give you a glimpse, we've been running a class for HR departments to avoid things like we look for a Bitcoin developer with 15 years of experience, or we look for a React developer with 16 years of experience, which is something that sometimes happens. Frankly, that's what we've been doing. Not so much the management
That's
stuff.
funny.
So,
I just want to mention, I recently also gave a course like Intro to Programming for Non-Programmers, and it was all a set of 25 recruiters. And then I showed them the most important slide, and then on that slide it just said, Java is not JavaScript.
Yeah,
that's what I get all the time from recruiters. And but you need to have to heard it once. You have to learn a little bit about the basics.
Absolutely. I think also moving forward as we see, the whole job market is developing and technical skills are becoming more and more important. I think you're doing a great job there, showing also non-code people how does the world actually work? How do all these things work that we use every single day? And with that, we've already spent all our talking time. I'd like to shift forward to the Q&A session. So far, we had the poll running in the background. What is the future of programming, code or no code? And I'd love to share the results. Let me check. Oh yeah, and actually, 83% say the future is code. 17% say the future is no code. So that's the response of our audience.
That's because I voted 11 times.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, don't do that with hackers, and trust the results of these polls. But I mean, it shows we're still a strong mindset. Maybe it can be changed. We'll see. Maybe eventually coding will move completely to a no-code regime. Florian just voted, it just changed. Now it's actually 33% no. Yeah, that's super interesting to hear. And thanks for everyone who voted. We're jumping right into the question segments. And the first question is from Anonymous. I am one of those founders with no coding skills. We want to build an app. Can you recommend some low or no code platforms or tools? Maybe I'll start with Andre to that, and then we can just like shift around in clockwise order.
Yeah, I get this question really a lot, and that's really cool because now, there's this entrepreneurial sense, and like people want to build it themselves, and they can. And I recommend, usually, I ask the people like, what have you used before? Have you already once put up a WordPress site? And then go for that tool. Like that, there's not such a huge difference in them, but having something you already know a bit and the barrier and like the fear of it is low, this will get you to a result fast. And there are some really nice other ones like coming out. I don't recommend people use Webflow right away. I think that even is kind of a mix in between of like no code and already coding. And there are also like people hired as Webflow developers. And so it's also already a bit more you have to do there. I usually say then if you use WordPress, then definitely pay some money for a theme. So then it looks good. But there are also many other like nice ones out there. I have to search the one. Like I will quickly search the one which I found nice. I think Blocks or something. Would be my recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Adam, do you have any recommendations for the self-learning listeners?
So
or CEOs?
So for self-learning, yeah, but for the question about I want to build something myself. I think this is really excuse me. I think this is really a question about why, and this is where I think it's really interesting. So we touched on some of the whys, right? One why is I don't need to hire a developer. I can save some money, or I can take the spirit and say I can build it myself. Another why that Florian mentioned is I can model my business processes in a no or low code way. Or right now, that's great. I can add automation on day one. There's another great reason to do it, which I'll throw into the ring, which is to prototype. If you follow a lean type methodology and you want to say build, measure, learn, you can get a lot of feedback really quickly with these tools. The thing is, again, I don't know what you're founding. If you're founding a restaurant, yeah, choose one of these. If you want to build the next Netflix or the next Clubhouse or something else that just steals everyone's data, then you got to ask yourself: are you building the first version of your product, or are you building a web page that's a calling card, or are you building something that allows you to test your ideas and to prototype, and with the knowledge that maybe you can use that for a year and then get some funding and then hire some developers. And so I don't know specific tools to mention. I like Andre's advice to say, go where you're comfortable. What I always tell my students when they run up to me and say, what programming language should I learn? My answer is always, if there was one best programming language, there would only be one programming language. And I think it's the same with these types of tools. There's no right or wrong per se, but of course there's some better fits here or there. But that's my general advice is I think you should really ask yourself why. Hopefully, if you're a founder and you're successful with your product, then you have a vision for what it'll be like in a few years with more people on the team. And does that vision include engineers doing engineering work on a complex streaming platform or a social media platform, or does that envision an in-person thing where you buy your services in and need a tool like Salesforce to manage your processes? Yeah, it's up to you.
Awesome. Tobias, do you have any tools to recommend for an aspiring founder with no coding skills?
I have unfortunately some bad news. I think it's extremely. So there are two ways you can go, and I think none of them includes no code. At least not in this case. What I want to say is that I think, and I'm putting my head as a kind of not as a kind of education founder or anything like that. Just as a founder, I think the first task when you when you want to start a company is to find a co-founder. It is impossible. It's just too hard to do it alone. It is just too hard. You're gonna quit. You cannot do everything yourself, and you need a partner. You need someone that can complement you really well from a personal perspective and from a skills perspective. And if you're not the technical founder, I think either you become one. So take a year. Actually become a. Just take some time and learn to code, or find a great co-founder that can be that person. And maybe they decide that they're going to use Bubble, for example, to try and hack a quickly something, or they will use something that they're comfortable with. Yeah. Andre, exactly. Bubble is something that is possible, or Card, if you need, I think so. Yeah, my advice will be do not do it. Just find a co-founder and let them decide, or become the technical co-founder. But then it takes time.
Got you there.
Yeah.
Florian, do you want to respond to that, or do you want to respond to the question as well?
Maybe as a Salesforce employee, I'm not the best to respond to that, but I would add to what Adam said, right? It's all about the what do you want to do? What's the use case? Do you have complex business processes you want to model? If not, then you don't need this capability, right? What is your budget? So I would say you just need to ask yourself this question, and also the question maybe, how fast can I come up to speed with it? Is there a good learning platform? And the other thing is also about, is there a community which can teach me to do that? Or if I have a question regarding this platform, do I have something like a Stack Overflow where I can ask a question and immediately get 10 valid responses? So that's also a very relevant thing. If you have the best technical platform and there is no community which can help you out, you won't come very far with that. So there are a lot of questions to answer before you can take this decision.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Community does matter, especially in also as a developer. If you're choosing an open source framework or project, I see a lot. I first look, how big is the community, how active is it? So that's a very great answer. The next question, okay, that's almost the same question. Which tools, platforms are best to learn? I'm gonna skip that one.
Yeah, or maybe I just want to.
Oh, okay,
add
Andre.
That I have a collection. Over the time, I always collect tools, which some of them I never tried myself, but like read good things about it because I usually code the stuff myself. But yeah, I can put that in the video, like in the YouTube, as a comment then later, and then yeah, put in a few names of tools which have their pros and cons, and some of them are really cool ones where you just set up an Airtable and it creates an app out of that, or creates an app out of a Google Sheet, which you have set up, or other things where you do a bit more yourself.
Wow, I'm going to try one of those out as well. Thanks. My next question, again from Anonymous. Okay, probably there's no name for him. Usually you give yourself side projects to learn coding and gain experience. How do you handle this at the beginning? I'm assuming the question is asking how to keep the motivation. That's how I interpret it, but feel free to reinterpret it. I'm going to direct this maybe to Tobias, because you have a lot of experience with self-learners at home.
Yeah, can you repeat the question, because I'm not sure I got it 100%.
Yeah, usually you give yourself side projects to learn coding and gain experience. How do you handle this at the beginning? So probably let's go through the whole process from finding an idea to actually staying motivated and learning the coding process.
I think so. I will tell you my experience, which is not perfect, but it's the one that I can at least discuss about. I was really into Bitcoin since many years, since like 2013. And then we failed 2 projects when we started with my co-founder. And at the end of that, I realized that one of the reasons that we failed this project is that because I was trying to be the CEO of a tech company without never being, like, I was an investor before, I was a venture investor before, but that is kind of like a relevant experience to some extent. But like you're still lacking a lot of things, like in terms of like how to actually build a product, and not just like how to be someone that can say, yes, this is going to be big or this is going to be small, right? So I think like that's, and I realized that. So I took 5 months, 6 months off work entirely before starting our kind of third project, which then became what is today Stripe School. And my co-founder helped me learn to code. Why did I learn Bitcoin? Even if I knew that Bitcoin engineering, it is not the hottest in terms of a job market. It's probably the only job in software engineering that if you don't get hired. There are not as many developers. People want blockchain developers, but not Bitcoin developers, even if it doesn't make sense from an engineering perspective. But they like that better. But what helped me a lot is that Bitcoin was my toy project. I loved Bitcoin. I knew it as something that I really wanted to learn. I knew the community, like I had. So I think that really helped me be motivated throughout the months in the ups and downs. So if I can just give you one kind of like piece of advice, is if it's something that is not kind of joining a Adam or kind of a program like ours, I think if you want to do it alone, pick something that you're really passionate about already. I don't know, like food. I don't know, like you're a surfer. Build a website for surfers or community. Like do something where you already have kind of a connection, because that's gonna make things very, very, like not very easy, but like for sure easier than learning to code by building something you do not care about. So just try to solve the problem for your mom, your family, yourself, your girlfriend, whoever, or something that is in your passions. I think that's really helpful.
Awesome, great response. We'll jump right to the next question now. Does it still in 2021 make sense to invest in learning web development? Which skills, languages are enough to cover the 80%, 20% being Netflix or Clubhouse? And I think maybe Adam is a great coding teacher to respond to this question. Maybe we can hear the others as well. But Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on that. So it's easy for me to say it depends, but which is what I believe. But I'm going to give you a stronger answer to make this more fun and say, yes, the web finally is useful. There's no better platform out there than the browser. The gorgeous use of the web is that a bunch of people managed to agree on something 25 years ago. And so it doesn't matter if you're using Microsoft or Apple or an Xbox or whatever you want. And it's all the web, and the web is how we communicate. And this pandemic has been brought to you by the web. Please, please learn the web. Okay, so really though, it all depends on what you're doing. What I can say is this. I think we are I don't know who I'm talking to. I don't know who asked the question. I think we're confusing basic digital literacy with job market perspectives and a few other things in this whole conversation. What do I mean? We talked about the CEO who's 50 years old and is maybe upskilling and learning on the side. We talk about the co-founder, the non-technical co-founder. We talk about the technical co-founder. These are different people. So I think it's 2021. Everyone needs basic digital literacy. What does that mean? Does it mean that you need to know how basic sorting algorithms work? I wouldn't say so. Does it mean that you can, read some subreddits that shake the stock market and have a pretty quick understanding of how this is happening and what an app like Robinhood is and why everyone's making fun of GameStop and what's going on in the world? Yeah, I do think so. Do you need to know how to code to do that? No, but you do need basic digital literacy for that, and to not just think this is a bunch of kids on Reddit or something like that, right? So why do I mention that? Because I think the question is really different depending on your goals always. I do think basic digital literacy is an essential thing in this day and age. Absolutely. And I hope more and more education systems bring that into high school and don't rely on university for that. If you're interested in programming, yeah, you should learn web development. You should also learn machine learning and a few other things, but you should definitely learn web development. If you're interested in working in tech, and when I say working in tech, I don't mean running a restaurant that needs a website, but I mean any of us on this, a lot of people at the factory. Yeah, I do think you should have a basic understanding of it, because you might be in that position that you mentioned, Toby. We were talking about HR. I've also run these seminars for HR. Java's not JavaScript. But what does it mean to hire a front end or a back end developer? Well, if you don't have a basic understanding of how the internet works, it's really hard to explain to someone what the difference is between a front end and a back end. And so I do think that if you're going to be in tech or tech adjacent fields, you need more than just basic digital literacy. And I think most fields are tech or tech adjacent these days.
Good response. Maybe Andre, maybe can you answer the second part? Which skills languages are enough, in your opinion, as a full stack developer to cover 80%? You're not going to build Netflix or Clubhouse, but if you can only pick one or two skills or languages, which would they be?
Yeah, well, like to pick up from Adam first, start with digital literacy. No, like that's answering a question, but digital literacy, and there I have a specific recommendation. In Team Treehouse is also like an online platform, and they have a wonderfully nice designed digital literacy class. I think they've got like a 1 or 2 week free starting thing. Well, that is a first step. And then why do people recommend web development? Like to start with that and to start with this crazy programming language JavaScript, which is so different than all the others. That is because you can build something small, see a result in front of your eyes directly, and share this with your friends and your mom or whoever, which is super motivating. That's why I also recommend people to start with like the basic web technologies of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And JavaScript grew so much over the years, and you now can build front end and back end with JavaScript. And that's why I recommend to also start with that programming language. And there are even packages where you can do all kinds of stuff like machine learning and so on, and even IoT on Arduino and stuff you can even do with JavaScript. Because so many people use it. But at some point, then you will get to know types and TypeScript. But I think I would start really with the web basics to go there. And actually, I'm currently working on a small thing, which I will then announce on my LinkedIn. So I want to call it like a coding show or something to make it fun for people who don't have anything to do with programming yet, to kind of get a feeling of what is the internet and like how does a website work and how can I quickly manipulate websites and even change prices on Amazon and feel like a hacker. And yeah, I think making it a bit gamified in the beginning, learning this basic literacy is a way to also judge in the beginning, is this a thing for me in the long run? Or is it, do I stop with the literacy part. It's my view.
Gotcha, Ver. Great answer, thank you. And also, like, coming back to this whole community thing again, I think is also really important. Like choosing a platform where you see there's enough people invested in it that can help me become better, that can also help maintain dependencies that I depend on working also in the future. Let's use this to jump to the last question that has been asked, which was, what's your expectation for company-based learning and development for technical upskilling, that being coding, designing, running, of employees? Most companies can't allow free boot camps. I'm not quite sure I can answer this question. Maybe Florian, I think, being most inside a large business, could help out. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so at Salesforce, when I started, for instance, I had a 7 days boot camp, and from that moment on, we did a lot of learning in this Trailhead platform. And you don't only have modules, but you also have collections of modules where they're called trail mixes. And if you want to become a technical architect, then there is a certain amount of modules that you need to do, and also certifications from different parties and so on. And I think if you start at a company, you need to be in person there when it's possible again, to get also the feel of the culture and so on, and the culture. And from that, I think you can, especially the kind of skills we're talking about today, you can learn a lot online. Yes, with self-paced learning.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer to the question. If anyone wants to jump in, feel free. Otherwise, yeah, I'd say that's a wrap. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This has been a really fun event. I think I learned a lot. I hope our audience did as well. And yeah, I don't know if we can hang out here in the call for us, maybe. But to our viewers, thanks a lot for joining us. And yeah, hope to see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lars.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.